been blessed to know the kids from the beginning and since they were babies till now. It's just heartbreaking.
They were very good in helping the community. And
they were a wonderful family. We felt like they were part of our family.
Picture a loving husband and wife, both with great jobs, raising 3 happy children in the serene green fields of rural Ohio. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Joy, wholesomeness, the American dream? That's probably what most people thought of when they saw the Dunham family. But they were wrong. Beneath the picture-perfect facade of middle America they represented, Jason and Melissa Dunham hid a nightmarish darkness that would shake their peaceful community to its core. This is the story of their horrific end, an end that came at the hands of the man that was supposed to protect them. This is the story of the haunting final days of the Dunham family and the brutal quintuple homicide that investigators struggle to wrap their heads around to this very day. Stay tuned while we unpack this spine-chilling tale. Melissa Dunham was the dictionary definition of a corn-fed, heartland-grown Ohio girl. Born and raised in the Buckeye State, she enjoyed a healthy upbringing with loving parents that gave her everything she wanted. A talented student, Melissa went on to get her MBA from Kent State, followed by yet another master's degree in taxation from the University of Akron. With such impressive academic credentials, she was destined for a well-paying career as an accountant, and she found a home for herself at a firm called Bober Marke Fedorovich, or BMF for short, when she was just 24 years old. She stuck with the firm for 18 years and won countless awards for her exceptional performance. Among her many accolades was a Woman of Excellence Award from the Women's Network and a 30 for the Future Award from the Greater Akron Chamber in 2019. To be clear, these awards weren't from her employer, but from outside institutions that were impressed by her skills. In June of 2023, just 2 months before her demise, the now 42-year-old Melissa was made partner at the company. There were no two ways about it. Melissa was a rising star. It seemed like she had nowhere to go but up. Her husband Jason, on the other hand, seemed like more of a mystery. We don't know much about where he grew up or how he ended up in Ohio, but it appears that he had a decent career as well. Based on reports, 46-year-old Jason worked in the sales and business development department of a company called POS Highway. While this likely earned him a solid income, his job wasn't quite as prestigious as his wife's. Could this have caused friction between them? Perhaps Jason resented his wife for earning more than him, or perhaps there were other factors that we've yet to uncover. Either way, these potential issues didn't stop Jason and Melissa from starting a beautiful family. Not long after Melissa started working at BMF, she and Jason got together and quickly hit it off. They didn't waste time before getting married, and by 2008, they became the proud parents of a daughter named Renee, who was 15 at the time of her demise. Over the next few years, they had another daughter named Amber and a son named Evan, who were 12 and 9 years old respectively when the incident occurred. The family lived in a comfortable home in Lake Township, about 15 miles away from Akron, where they became beloved members of the community. All the children were known for being sporty and outgoing, with Renee and Amber participating in the Girl Scouts and Evan joining the Boy Scouts at a young age. Melissa was heavily involved in these activities too, often encouraging the girls to sell cookies for the Girl Scouts and write thank you letters to people that bought a box. Much like their mother, the children were overachievers at school. Both Renee and Amber were part of the school band, with Amber showing considerable talent in cross-country events as well. But outside of their accomplishments, each child had a distinct personality. Everyone could see them becoming their true selves as they grew up. Renee, a tomboy who loved working with her hands, could often be found outside doing yard work. Her mother never had to ask her to rake the leaves. That was just something Renee enjoyed doing. As for Amber, she was about as girly as a girl could be, often showing a generous streak that made her a neighborhood darling. According to witness statements, she loved baking and would regularly make treats for her neighbors. Evan, the youngest, had recently found a passion for Legos, suggesting that he liked building things and solving puzzles. On top of that, he was apparently able to solve a Rubik's Cube in under 2 minutes, which further shows how highly intelligent he was at such a young age. The children also seemed to have a great relationship with each other, frequently playing video games together or running around outside with their 2 dogs. Each member of the family was like the piece of a puzzle that was meant to fit together, except for Jason. Jason was always a bit of a mystery, even to his neighbors. One member of the community, Rebecca Gyoker, stated that she often met with Melissa and always enjoyed her company. But despite living close by for years, she'd never met Jason even once. Of course, there were some neighbors that had interacted with the Dunham patriarch, like Edmund and Denise Gadzako, who lived right next door. There were some signs that Jason was a decent person, at least according to the Gadzakos. He'd help them put a basketball hoop up, and whenever they saw him with the children, it seemed like they got along fairly well. But with that said, Denise has also spoken out about how controlling Jason could be. Though she hasn't gone into detail about his behavior, there's a lot that we can guess based on what eventually happened. One can speculate that Jason was a man with a very short temper. What he said was final, and any arguments would lead to him flying off the handle. The children seemed well adjusted despite this, and he wasn't able to hold Melissa back in her career. But the seeds of what was to come had already been planted. The odd thing is, local police hadn't received any domestic dispute reports from the Dunhams until that fateful day when they all lost their lives. Could the family have been keeping something from the community? Were either of the parents having an affair? There's also a chance that the children were causing friction, especially considering that Amber and Renee were entering a rebellious age. Whatever the case may be, something strange started happening in late August. As the summer of 2023 started to draw to a close, neighbors noticed that the children weren't coming out to play as much. Before this, they were practically always outdoors riding their bikes and playing fetch with the dogs. Though they also loved to play video games, all 3 children were known for being active, so barely a day went by that the neighbors didn't see them. They also happened to be a part of Rebecca Gyoker's morning routine, with the neighbor reporting that they always waved to her while walking to their bus stop. All of a sudden, those smiles were nowhere to be found, and their outdoor play sessions basically came to a halt. The Gadzakos saw the children often, since they usually came over to play with their grandchildren. These visits had also stopped over the past few days, and the colorful cupcakes Amber used to bring over were curiously absent too. Where were these children all of a sudden? Did something happen that made them want to stay indoors? Based on what we know about the father, it's possible that Jason wasn't allowing them to go outside anymore. Why he'd impose such a restriction is anybody's guess, but some have theorized that he was already entering a homicidal state of mind. Tensions were rising in the Dunham household, and nobody in the area knew what was about to happen. On the 23rd of August, something extremely unusual happened. Melissa failed to show up for work. This was a woman that prided herself on her punctuality and work ethic. She never took unannounced days off, so this behavior raised some suspicion with her co-workers and superiors. They didn't make much of it, though, possibly assuming that Melissa was down with a cold. After an 18-year spotless record, they must have figured that she deserved to just take a day to herself for a change. But when Melissa didn't show up the next day as well, mental alarm bells started going off. She wasn't answering her phone, she wasn't responding to texts, and no one had any idea where she could be. With so many unanswered questions, her co-workers decided it was time to call the police. What they'd find at the Dunham residence would haunt them for the rest of their lives. At 7:30 p.m. on August 24th, police arrived at the Dunham family home on Carnation Avenue and found Jason and Melissa's cars present outside. They clearly hadn't gone anywhere, so why weren't they answering the phone? What's more, what appeared to be days' worth of mail had piled up outside their home. Packages were strewn across the lawn, letters were lying in piles, and overall it seemed like the Dunhams had been away for a while. And yet, their cars were right outside. Something was wrong, and the police needed to find out what. The door was locked, so police requested the help of Edmund Gadzako to gain entry. Once they made their way inside, they were overcome by the stench of rotting flesh. As the police moved in, they eventually came across 5 bodies that were pumped full of bullets. These bodies belonged to the Dunham family, and from the looks of things, they'd been dead for at least 2 days. It took the police 2 hours to enter the home. After making the discovery, they officially declared them dead at 9:52 p.m. and started an investigation. They found no signs of broken entry, and the only weapon on the scene belonged to the Dunhams themselves. It turned out that both Melissa and Jason had concealed carry permits, so there was no chance that someone else had brought the firearm into their home. Further investigation revealed no signs of foul play, so the police were left with only one conclusion. This was a case of a domestic dispute gone wrong. Police theorized that Jason and Melissa had gotten into an argument that turned violent, and once the gun was brought out, there was no turning back. Police acknowledged that the homicides were committed with a handgun, and there was no question about who had pulled the trigger. If the testimony of the neighbors was anything to go by, Jason's temper had gotten the better of him. This meant that he'd not only gunned down his wife, but his own children as well. Following this, he turned the gun on himself and pulled the trigger. The only question was, why? What possible motive could there be for him to commit a quadruple homicide? If the Dunhams had had loud arguments in the past, the neighbors would have heard them and reported them to the police. And there's an even more curious element to this story. How did nobody hear the gunshots? In such a close-knit community, neighbors tend to know everything about each other's lives. Despite that, Jason was able to fire off multiple shots without alerting anyone in the vicinity. No silencer was found on the scene, so the only other way he could have muffled the shots was through a pillow or cushion of some sort. If this is how it happened, it implies that Jason's actions were cold, calculated, and completely intentional. He wasn't in a fit of rage, and he wasn't acting impulsively. While police haven't released any information on the number of shots fired, at least 4 must have gone off before Jason shot himself. Was this something he'd been planning for a while? That might explain how no one knew about it for days, but it doesn't explain the police's explanation that it was all just a domestic dispute. It's almost like Jason snapped out of nowhere. But the violent impulses that compelled him to act must have been swirling around for quite a while. A single homicide can be an act of passion, but 4? That requires a certain amount of cold-bloodedness, and despite seeming controlling and off-putting, Jason had simply never shown signs of being a cold-blooded killer in the past. Of course, there's no real way to know what happened. All we can do is look at the evidence and the testimony and come up with theories. Since the likely perpetrator also died on the scene, it seems like there won't be any justice for the family either. This is a mystery that refuses to be solved, because anyone that could have answered our questions lost their life that night. The death of a beloved family sparked an outpouring of sympathy from co-workers, schoolmates, and neighbors alike.
And we've been blessed to know the kids from the beginning, and since they were babies till now. It's just heartbreaking.
They were very, very good in helping the community.
They were a wonderful family. We felt like they were part of our family.
We have a very tight-knit, faith-based community. We're going to lean on that and lean on our folks to love on one another and take care of each other.
While giving an interview on the subject, Edmund Gazzacco nearly broke down into tears while talking about the children. He'd seen them grown up. He'd watched the entire family come into being ever since the Dunhams moved in next door 18 years ago. At the start of the summer, they'd even played a baseball game together in their front yard, with Jason acting perfectly normal at the time. And now, in the blink of an eye, they were all gone. Sarah Martin, the chief operating officer of BMF, put out a public statement expressing how devastated the entire company was at this loss. Melissa wasn't just a co-worker to them, nor was she just an asset. She was a friend of 18 years, one who deserved to enjoy many more decades of success. Based on her accolades and her meteoric rise, she could have been running the place in a few years. Instead, most people will remember her as the mother that was inexplicably shot by her husband in her own home. when the school was informed, the news hit them just as hard. Renee was scheduled to go to an away game to perform with the school band, and she was the second loss they'd experienced in the past year. Though the previous death came about due to a surgery, the double blow shattered the children's spirits. The school district was forced to send out a crisis response team with counselors and other support workers to help the Dunham schoolmates make sense of this tragedy. There was no way to save the family. The deed was done, but the people that knew them still held a candlelight vigil in their honor. Uniontown Police Chief Michael Batchink went so far as to say that this was the most gruesome case he'd ever taken part in over his 23-year-long career. In February of 2024, a close friend of the family named Angelia Lehman brought surviving family members and other close acquaintances together to create a scholarship in the Dunham's honor. Through this scholarship, the deceased family will be able to live on and be remembered for something other than being the victims of tragic gun violence. Seniors graduating from Lake High School will now have the chance to get financial assistance for college if they honor the Dunham legacy. It was a legacy of community outreach, of being part of a team, of believing in something greater than themselves. The best way this can be summed up is through a video Melissa recorded for the Greater Akron Chamber. In the clip, she talks about how much she loves being a part of Lake Township. She talks about how the local school challenges her children and how, despite being a small community, it provides countless opportunities for people that want to live there.
It's a wonderful community to raise our children. I have ties to the community with the organizations that I work with. I love being a part of community support services and the Girl Scouts of Northeast Ohio. And the school districts are amazing. They challenge my children, and it's a great place to live, thrive, and there's many opportunities in this small community.
Jason Dunham, though, isn't remembered as fondly. The bizarre actions he committed that day have left the community devastated. It'll be years before the Gadzakos, the Gyokers, and other neighbors manage to heal from the loss. What do you think of this case? Do you think this was just a domestic dispute gone wrong? Or did Jason have darker intentions that no one knew about? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more videos like this, please be sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more true crime videos. Take care and see you in the next one.